Aloha! Thank you for joining me. My name is Allison Burrell, and I work for the East Maui Watershed Partnership. I hope with this presentation today to talk to you guys about what a watershed is, why it's important, the threats to the watershed, and what we're doing about it. So what is a watershed? Do you think it's just a shed that holds the water? Unlike my image here, and the literal term taken from watershed, it is not the shed that holds the water. So what is a watershed? A watershed is basically an area of land that collects water. So if it was pouring rain outside, that water is going to collect somewhere. Oftentimes we see it collect on sidewalks and roads, but eventually it will run off of those places and head downstream. So a watershed unit encompasses an area where the water runs off from the tallest points, usually ridgetop to ridgetop, from the summit and out towards the sea, where the water will collect down into these different streams and gulches and eventually make its way out to the sea. It can also include areas where water runs underground. The whole idea is that if you have a healthy watershed, we'll have fresh, clean water from now all the way into the future. So take a look at this picture. In your mind's eye, think about how many watersheds you see in this picture. And remember, you have to see the whole thing from the top of the mountain all the way down to the sea. So a whole area that collects water and heads out to the sea. See if you can figure out where each one is. If you guessed 2, you're right. Here's one. So notice it goes from the highest ridge tops where water would collect down into that basin and out to the sea. And here's the second one. It's a little bit steeper. So with the definition of a watershed, all areas of land that collect water, do you think we're in a watershed right now? Yes, we are. No matter where you are on land, you're in a watershed. Here are all the watershed units of Maui. You'll notice there's a lot more watersheds on the northeast side of the island than on the southern side. Why do you think that is? A lot of that reason is because we get our weather on the islands through what's called the trade winds that come consistently from the northeast. That brings clouds and rainfall, which shapes the land into all these different valleys and gulches, which creates tiny little watersheds. So we have a lot more watersheds on that side of the island where it rains a lot more versus the drier areas like Kihei and Lahaina. So why do we care about watersheds? Why are they important? They provide for us life. We all need water to survive. Also for culture. A lot of these watershed areas have native plants and animals that when the Hawaiians came here, they began to use in order to perpetuate their culture. Whether it be medicinal or tools, they need these native plants and animals in order to perpetuate their culture. And for biodiversity. It's okay if you don't understand what that word says. Bio basically means life, and diversity is different. So different forms of plant life. We want to see lots of different plants and animals living in an area than rather just one tree or just one animal there. So how does it make water? It does it with the help of native trees. So when you look at a healthy watershed, it's going to have a layered forest, usually made up of native trees that were here before humans because they were the most effective at capturing water. So with that, you would have your tall, emergent canopy trees, and what these do is slow down the rain. If it's pouring outside and there's not a building close by, where do you usually run in a rainstorm? Under a tree. That's because it slows down the rain, so it doesn't hit you so hard. Well, that happens to also slow down the rain so it doesn't impact the ground so hard and wash off the soils and dirts in a flood of water. Then we have our subcanopy of trees. This is basically the middle layer of trees that you would see. And these are really good at capturing what's called fog drip. So when you look up at the top of the mountains of Haleakala or the West Maui Mountains in Molokai Hawaii, you see that ring of clouds hanging around at the top. That is our subcanopy trees working to collect fog drip. Those clouds pass through these trees and the water condenses on their leaf surfaces, and then it falls off the leaves to the ground below. 30% of the water that we drink out of our taps comes from this process alone. Then you have understory and ground cover. The understory keeps things humid, and it keeps the water from evaporating and transpiring back out into the atmosphere. And then we have our ground cover that acts like a giant sponge, and it basically soaks all that water that's dripping from the emergent trees and the subcanopy and dripping it down into the ground and creating less erosion and runoff and less evaporation. So let's say it's raining outside. On average, about 3% of that water will drip down into the ground into an underwater storage area called an aquifer. About 31% runs off into streams, but most of it actually goes back into the atmosphere via evaporation and transpiration. Here on Maui, we get our water by pumping it out of the ground from the aquifer, or we collect it from the streams. So we want to make sure we have enough water in these two places so we have water for the future. The East Maui Watershed Partnership runs from Makua out towards Hana. If you look at the green blob on the map of Maui there, that is the whole area that makes up the Watershed Partnership, where people are working together to help protect the watersheds in that area. On average, the East Maui Watershed has produced up to 60 billion gallons of water a year for Maui to use. 60 billion gallons! That's amazing. So let's look at how was it formed. Let's go back when the lava first was spewing out of the ocean floor and rising above the ocean and cooling to form our hardened land masses that we know today. Then we have to ask, how did things get here? How did plants and animals get here when all the other land masses were so far away? And it was by the 3 W's, which are wind, water, and wings. So many things came through the wind, things like insects that were blown through currents of the wind, including spiders that can throw up a little, almost like kite through their web and blow across the wind currents and then just happen to fall down on our little Hawaiian island and survive. Also by water. So it's pretty obvious that things can swim here, but things can also come on dead floating logs or wash up on our shorelines and arrive that way. But the majority of things that got here came via wings or birds. Not so much stuck to the bird, but something that the bird ate somewhere else, and it put it into its belly, and then it was flying across the ocean and probably got blown off course and landed in the Hawaiian Islands. Then that little seed got pooped out and miraculously grew on our lava rock islands. So once these species got to our little Hawaiian, of those over 50 birds that evolved here, only about a third of those are left today in the Hawaiian Islands. And of those that are left, only 6 live on Maui. Let's take a look at the 6 Hawaiian honeycreepers that live here on Maui. The more abundant one that we have is the apapane, and it's red in color, as you can see on this top picture here, and it has a little black beak. This is a nectar feeder, and it's often distinguished by the fact that it has a little white butt. To make it easy for us to recognize it, we nicknamed the apapane apapanties, like it's wearing little white underwear. Let's go ahead and listen to the call of the apapane. Another bird that we have here is the i'iwi. And the i'iwi is kind of the iconic honeycreeper bird that you see on brochures because it has that bill that's very sickle-shaped that just matches perfectly into our bellflower family of flowers. This bird and these flowers perfectly adapted side by side through time. Let's go ahead and listen to its call. Now the EEV, unfortunately, in 2017 was listed as threatened. So its numbers are decreasing as we go through time. So the other birds that we have is the amakihi. And the amakihi lives on Maui, but also lives on Hawaii Island. And this is another nectar feeding bird, and it's distinguished by, again, a little black bill, and it has this what looks like a little black mask that runs from its beak all the way to its eye. Let's listen to its call. On the bottom, we have the Maui alawahio. And just as its name says, this bird is only known to Maui and nowhere else in the world. And it is also only known to the east side of Maui. The population of this bird is somewhere around 100,000. The reason I'm telling you that will be more important as we look at some of our other birds. Let's listen to its call. This bird, oftentimes we say, looks like a little tennis ball. It's small and pudgy, and the alawahio enjoys to eat insects. These two birds, the last of our 6 that we still know of on Maui, are very important because they are endangered. So the akohe on the top there is very easily to recognize because of its black and orange colorings and its crest, which looks like a little mohawk, which serves a purpose as it helps to pollinate our flowers as it sticks its head in to drink nectar from every flower. The akohe is sometimes known as the bully of the forest because oftentimes as it flies into a tree, a lot of the other birds will fly out. Let's listen to the akohe's call. Remember when I told you that the alawahio had about 100,000 birds left in the wild? Well, the akohe, being endangered, has around somewhere about 2,000 or less. And we take that even further when we look at the kiwi-kiu down on the bottom. The kiwi-kiu is probably somewhere less than 200 birds known in the wild and is known as critically endangered. This bird has that parrot-like bill which is used to crack open branches to get insects and grubs. This bird has undergone extensive efforts to try and increase its population by doing captive breeding and trying to translocate some of the bird communities to the other parts of the island in hopes that it will grow. Let's listen to its call. One of the most recent losses in our native honeycreepers on Maui is the po'ouli. The po'ouli was discovered not that long ago in 1973, and by the early 2000s, they were never seen again. There was known to be 2 out in the wild and 1 in captivity, and the 1 in captivity had passed away, and the 2 in the wild were never seen. So to this day, they're probably extinct. For a little extra credit, you can go onto YouTube and look up matchmaking po'ouli, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, and see a little video about what they did to try and save this bird. In fact, birds are not the only species in danger. The state of Hawaii is the endangered species capital of the United States. Over 1/3 of all the animals and plants listed as endangered or threatened in the U.S. come from Hawaii. A lot of that has to do because of our geographical location, located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Let's take a look at all those plants and animals that arrived here before humans. Looking at this map, everything that is colored is considered native. So the different colors just represent different forest areas, whether they be high up on the mountain or dry coastal areas. But basically, what I want you to take from this is that everything that is colored is a native plant area. So of course, without humans being here, everything got here on its own and is considered native. If we were to compare the same map to the more present time, this is the area of our islands that is left native. Unfortunately, most of the area below 2,500 feet has been changed, and the area that remains the way it looked when the Hawaiians first came here only exists high up in these mountain regions. So why are our native species disappearing? One of the reasons our native species are disappearing is due to habitat degradation. Habitat basically means home. If we look at this video here of this introduced pig, you'll notice that a lot of the forest floor is missing. If you remember from our previous slide, we need that forest floor to act like a sponge. Pigs are really good at digging up large tracts of land. As you can see here, they use their nose and their tusks to dig up areas to find food. One pig can dig up the area of a football field in a matter of 1 week. And these pigs act like little natural gardeners. They like to eat other plants that are not native to here, things like invasive strawberry guava. It's a tasty fruit, and I think all of us has eaten it, but pigs really like it. What happens is they eat it, and after they've tilled up the ground through this action looking for food, then they poop out the seeds that they ate from earlier, and now the strawberry guava forest begins to grow, replacing the native forest that was once there. In general, feral ungulates, and ungulates means any animal with a hoof, so things like cows, deer, goats, and pigs, were not native to this area. They were not here before humans, and our native forests were not adapted to them. So they cause extensive damage by browsing and eating, by trampling, and by digging up our forests. We also have things like invasive diseases, both in our plant life and in our animal life. One current disease that we are dealing with is called rapid ohia death. And this, just like its name, affects ohia trees very rapidly. Ohia trees make up almost 85% of our native wet forest canopy and are very important to many of the plant and animal life. As you can see in the picture up top, it can go from a beautiful forest to a totally dead forest in a matter of a few months. We also have diseases that are spread by mosquitoes that affect particularly our birds. There's an avian malaria and an avian pox. The avian malaria can kill the bird within 10 days, and the pox makes the birds grow these deformations on them and makes it hard for them to eat and survive and do their daily activities. There's also new predators that were introduced, things like rats and mongoose that eat our native snails and our native birds, and competitors, things like birds that weren't here before that compete for habitat space and for food, and plants that weren't here before that take up large tracts of land and outcompete the native trees and shrubs that were here originally. So at the East Maui Watershed Partnership, what we do is we work to protect the native rainforests. We build fences to keep out wild ungulates, or those hooved animals like pigs, goats, and deer. We remove invasive plants and animals from inside our managed areas. And we do outreach and education to teach people about the importance of these special areas. Let's watch this video of a flyover of the East Maui Watershed. You can really see all the different layers of trees and shrubs and the amount of crystal clear water that is flowing out of these forests. So we are the defenders of the watershed. Here we have one of our field crow members going out to remove invasive Himalayan ginger. We've recently tried to rename this toilet brush ginger. As you can see, it kind of looks like a toilet brush because although it is very beautiful, which is why it was originally planted in Hawaii, it can grow in dense thickets, as you can see in this picture here, not allowing anything else to grow around it. The work that we do requires us to use helicopters as we go to remote areas to work, and sometimes that also means that we have to camp out in these areas for weeks at a time in order to get the job done. So let's look at our home away from home. So sometimes we have structures that are built out into the mountain where we have to do a lot of work. But most of the time we sleep in little areas of we call a cot tent covered by a tarp. And then we have a central area with a larger tarp where we cook all our breakfast and our dinners and get ready or finish our workday. A lot of the work that we do is putting up fences. These fences keep out those wild ungulates, those pigs and the deer and the goats, to keep them out of our areas of our native forests so they can be allowed to thrive. Can you see the difference here on what a fence can do? What side do you think the animals are on? You got it. On the right side was full of goats that have eaten all the native plants down to nothing. You put in the fence, it allows the plants to come back. In the distance, that is Kaupo Gap, and this is the fence around Haleakala Crater. So good news, you can help. Can you think of some ways to help our watershed? Try to come up with one or two on your own right now. I've got a list for you too. So, knowledge is power. Now that you have taken the time to learn about our watersheds and what's affecting them, make sure to share that with other people that might not know. Because sharing is caring. Conserving water. Although we do get a lot of rain here on Maui, we also need to conserve that water because at some point we could run out or we could run through areas of droughts, and we definitely need to conserve water. Volunteer. Your time is important, and where you spend it and how you spend it is also important. There are lots of places on Maui that need your help where you can go on the weekends with your family and help them remove invasive plants or replant native areas. Clean your shoes. Cleaning your shoes helps prevent the spread of invasive plants and diseases. You can clean them by getting a little brush, brushing off all the dirt and seeds, as you can see in the picture here, and then by purchasing a bottle of rubbing alcohol and spraying all the bottoms of your shoes to kill any diseases that could be on there. Don't bring invasives to Maui. Most of our invasive plants have gotten here because someone thought they looked pretty somewhere else and brought them here to plant in their yard. Just don't do it. Plant natives instead. Natives are just as beautiful and better adapted to the environments here. So go out and buy a native plant at your local nursery and put it in your yard. Buy local. By buying fruits and vegetables and products that are made here within the Hawaiian Islands, you're not supporting all the shipments that come from other places in the world that could be harboring invasive plants and animals. And don't forget to go outside and enjoy nature, and someday you can come work for us. And remember, if this sounds fun to you, this could be your job. Thank you for your time. And if you want to learn more, please visit us at our website, www.eastmauiwatershed.org or EMWP.org. And we also have social media sites on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you.